Okay, so this is the additional video for the week. I'll have a whiteboard behind me. I know it's a little blurry. Then you can already see my camera adjusted. When I move backwards, it should adjust okay. But kind of keep it pretty short. We'll go over some of the slides I skipped and then kind of finish out the pricing strategy that we'd started talking about in class. So when we were talking about things like league-wide advertising. When we start to think about the role of leagues and how some of them may differ, one of them that is a good thing to talk about, and this will come up later on in the course, are the European Soccer League system. So they have open leagues, okay? So the way that it works is that after the season has concluded, if you are a better performing team, you can get promoted to this higher league. So essentially like two tiers of leagues, right? And if you perform higher in the lower league, the following year, you might get bumped up to the better league, right? And then the worst teams from the better league will get kind of demoted to that lower level division, that lower league, right? So what's the benefits of this, right? Let's think about the pros and cons. So one thing this is going to do is it's going to ensure that every year your high quality league has higher quality teams, providing like a higher quality product. You can also think about it within each one of those leagues, both the higher and the lower quality league, the teams that are playing each other are going to be more evenly matched. So one thing that we'll talk about next week on, I believe, probably Tuesday, maybe it'll push over into Thursday, but we'll talk about how fans value competitive balance, or fans want to see a game, they don't know the outcome, in the sense that one team isn't so much better than the other that there's some uncertainty about what the outcome of the game is going to be. So this allows for that in both leagues. It also kind of allows for a team, if we're thinking about the incentives that exist, well, if I'm in that lower level league, right, I have a huge incentive to do very well so I can get promoted. If I'm in the higher quality league, I have a huge incentive to do well so I don't get demoted. So it kind of puts this additional incentive on a team because, you know, if it wasn't European Soccer League where you can be promoted or demoted like the NFL, if I win 0 games, I still earn whatever revenue on average an NFL team earns, right? Not on average, but I'm going to, enjoy the revenue that comes from being an NFL team. If in the NFL, if you were one of the lower quality teams and you got demoted to like the Arena League or something, well, now there's a huge incentive to make sure I don't win 0 games. I at least win enough games to where I stay in this league, right? The problem with this is that because there's a huge additional marginal revenue, right? Each win has so much additional revenue because if I don't win, I could get demoted, right? That teams will justify huge expenses to try to stay in that top high quality league or to try to get promoted to that league. Now, the problem is these expenses are justified prior to the games being played. Once the games are played, if I don't win as many games, right, then, if I get demoted, I'm pulling my picture up a little bit. If I get demoted, then you can, even though you were spending all this money because you knew there was this higher additional revenue you're going to earn from performing well, if you end up just losing the games by just the sake of the way that things kind of roll in the game sometimes, and you get demoted, well, now you had all these huge expenses and you don't get those additional revenues from staying in that high quality league. So, one of the examples, I forget how long, 3-4 years ago, Leeds United fell from the Premier League down to the Champions League. So the Premier League is kind of the higher quality league, Champions League not quite as high quality, right? And they had spent tons of money, right? And so essentially that year they had a huge loss. Like their profit loss was huge, right? Because they spent all this additional money on their players and ended up not winning enough games to stay in that Premier League. But the increased incentives is really the benefit of having this structure. We can also think about some other types of leagues, which would be franchise versus entity. So franchise leagues are primarily like how we think about all the major sports, like NFL, MLB, and NBA, NHL. Basically, every single team, right, chooses their own goals independently, right? They're a franchise. They're bought into the NBA brand or the NBA league, but they make their individual level decisions on player salaries and things like, the arenas that they choose, things like that. So Some teams might go for win maximization, some might go for profit maximization. Some teams might decide they want to do some local advertising, others don't. Some teams might want to sign local broadcast deals, others don't, right? There's variation across the teams in how they're generating revenue or how they're operating their team. A single entity league is where each owner, right, has some share of the overall league performance, okay? So here with a franchise league, if I'm the New York Knicks and I have an amazing season, I earn all this additional revenue, I get to keep that, right? Doesn't matter if the league as a whole suffered that year. Maybe most teams did poorly. I would still get to, I would still benefit from the decisions I made. With a single entity league, I now have some stake, right, in how the overall league does, okay? So I've now created this additional incentive for them not to only do well for themselves or make optimal decisions for themselves, but their decisions about how it's going to impact the league also will alter their revenues, right? So you can think about league-wide decisions are done to help minimize costs, right? Usually it's good for emerging leagues where you want to make sure every team is really buying in, right? That the success of the league is tied to the revenues that those teams earn. So it's good for emerging leagues because that way you ensure that this league gets, each team has an increased incentive to make sure this league keeps on doing well and kind of establishes itself, right? So the WNBA and Major League Soccer both have kind of employed this strategy where they've tied the incentives that an owner faces to how well the league performs as a whole, not just their individual team. So there's some differences in leagues that I wanted to make sure we talk about. We then kind of went over monopoly, dead weight losses. We went through a couple pricing strategies, variable, dynamic, bundling. So next one we'll talk about is price discrimination. So I mentioned this a little bit in class, but it's basically charging different consumers what their valuation is, trying to identify on the demand curve how much each individual consumer's values, I think I showed as tickets, right? Thinking about the ticket market primarily. And so then essentially demand became our marginal revenue curve, right? So I'm going to discuss why all these things are byproducts of that. And I mentioned in class, it's difficult to do in practice, although with more information, more data coming from people's spending habits, from what they do online, it's a little bit easier to target consumers or have a better idea of what consumers to target who might value the tickets higher and those who might value them lower. Right? Oh, I don't want to do that. I want to go to, not invite, stop share. Okay. So we'll just kind of give you a quick idea of what that looks like. I know I did in class, but just kind of a review. So let's say, right, we've got this quantity of tickets and we've got the price of tickets, right? And I'm thinking about, we've got some capacity where supply runs along the marginal cost, or runs along the x-axis, so that marginal cost is 0 up to the point where we hit capacity, and think about this is now our supply or our marginal cost curve. So we've then got some demand curve and we face some marginal revenue curve, right? So instead of the monopolist kind of choosing where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue, charging this price, what they'll do is they'll try to charge the consumer who values the very first ticket the highest, they'll try to charge them exactly that amount. The person who values the next highest, exactly that amount, all the way down to this last ticket sold, okay? If they're able to, and they fill the stadium, right, at capacity. If they're able to do this, the amount of revenue, additional revenue they earn from each ticket sold is whatever the person values it at, or the marginal benefit. So our new marginal revenue curve, if I'm able to perfectly price discriminate, essentially becomes our demand curve. And now what is producer surplus? Well, I'm getting this price for every single ticket I sell, and I'm selling this many tickets. So producer surplus becomes the entire area under the demand curve and above our supply curve, which runs kind of horizontal there, right? So this, you can kind of see, this is why firms like this, because they can essentially turn all of surplus into producer surplus, right? What's also, in this model, like let's say before I had my marginal revenue, I drew it twice as steep. and it ends up being that the optimal quantity of tickets is here. I charge this price, but I lose out on all this additional surplus because I'm no longer selling those tickets, right? So this is kind of surplus that will be lost, or we'll call that our deadweight loss, right? But if I'm able to perfectly price discriminate, we say we got all the way back up to this point, and we claimed that surplus eventually. So that's why a monopolist would like to perfectly price discriminate, because I can essentially still act as a monopolist, but enjoy additional surplus there. And it's to say it's good for society. If there's no total surplus loss, there's no deadweight loss there, but all of surplus now goes to producers and none to consumers, right? What's consumer surplus here? Well, every consumer is paying exactly how much they benefit. So producer surplus, thinking about that being the difference between their marginal benefit and the price they pay. Well, now that's the same for every consumer. So every consumer will have a surplus of 0, and total consumer surplus then is 0, right? So that was some of the byproducts of being able to perfectly, if I can get my chair back to the computer here. So consumer surplus goes to 0. However, we are able to sell more tickets, right, as a perfectly price discriminating monopolist. And all of surplus now becomes producer surplus. So we see an increase in producer surplus. Okay. Two-part pricing is going to use a similar idea, but it's a little bit different. So I think the way I like to usually explain this is relative to one consumer. So we know that one consumer is willing to pay more for the first game that they attend, for that first ticket, than for the second ticket or the second game they go to that season, right? And so what I might want to do is say, well, look, it's kind of hard to know exactly what that valuation is. Different consumers are different. But if I have a pretty good idea about what my representative consumer is, I'll use one person's individual demand curve and try to charge them using this two-part pricing. So typically what happens is with two-part pricing, it's like Costco. So you pay a fixed fee to be a member, and then for each additional thing you purchase, there's a marginal or a variable price, right? And with the Costco example, it's like different products would be different, but you're paying a lower price than if you hadn't been a member, right? But you still have this huge fixed fee, okay? So when it comes to kind of our sport examples of this, it's really what we're thinking about is season tickets, okay? So if we have season tickets, essentially, once you purchase your season tickets, the cost of it going to each game is 0, right? In terms of your ticket cost, your ticket price, the additional money you're spending to get that ticket is 0 every game. Okay. Oh, geez. I just activated Siri with something I said. Sorry about that. The second thing, so we have that marginal cost is essentially 0. But you pay this huge upfront fee to be a season ticket holder, right? So the idea of what that fee will be is what I'll try to draw you here, right? So they like this, and we'll see why in a second, because they can earn higher profits than simply setting the price for each game, for each ticket for each game at the same level, right? As a single price monopolist. So two-part pricing, we're going to think about, we have a representative consumer, right, that we think might be interested in purchasing season tickets. So got our quantity of tickets here, and we have kind of our price up here, right? So maybe a consumer, we have this, let's say the intercept, I'm going to make it easy, is 100. So they kind of think about their intercept there as 100. Now, capacity never enters the equation because, I'm not even drawing this to scale, because capacity, well, let's see if I can get my video to, there we go, focus a little bit better. Okay. So capacity is somewhere way out here. For the individual consumer, maybe at most, they purchase 5 tickets. Or, if we want to do this a season ticket game, let's do the NFL, half of them, so the home games would be 8, right? So how much would this person be willing to pay for all 8 games? Well, maybe for the first ticket, I don't know, it's something like, actually, let me make these numbers so that it makes a little more sense. If I have 8 games, it's 10 each time. Let's start that intercept off at 80. So maybe for that first game, I'd be willing to pay kind of $70, right? My demand curve, which reflects my marginal benefit, right? For that first ticket, I'd pay $70. For the second ticket, I'd pay 60, so on and so forth, right? But if I think about what consumer surplus is here, once you know, I purchase, if I were to purchase the season tickets, well, it'd be the area under my marginal benefit, and now the marginal cost is 0. So this entire area under my individual demand curve would represent this one individual's consumer surplus. So how much would they be willing to pay? Well, whatever this area is, okay? So what am I going to charge them? I'm going to figure out what that entire area of surplus is, and that'll be kind of that fixed fee. Oh, you can't see that. Oh, come on. Let me see real quick. I'm going to try to adjust for low light and see if that helps. Focus a little bit better now. It's not perfect. Hold on, let me see. Try this other color. No. I'm loving technology lately. Let me see. How could I get this to be a little bit better? Let me try readjusting for that again. Looking a little bit better earlier. Well, so basically what I'm going to do is I want to try to find the area of this triangle, right? Well, I know the length of that triangle is 80. I know the width of it is 8, right? So 80 times 8. And then I'm looking at a triangle, so the area would be times 1/2. Length times width times 1/2, right? So, you know, I do that, well, I get 640 divided by 2. So the fixed fee I should charge is $340. Move my mouse out of the way here. Now, the marginal cost, this is a weird one, because when we sell season tickets, the variable or the marginal cost I charge is actually 0. So to figure out the kind of fixed fee that we want to charge, we look at our intercepts, right? And then it's really just finding the area of a rectangle, okay? Now, if you want to think about this is a representative consumer, right? The reason why you wouldn't want to charge a single price for every ticket, let's say that all the games are the exact same quality. It's just that this one individual, like once I go to one game, I don't value going to a second game that season near as much. So if I try to set the price at something like, you know, 50, they'll purchase maybe, what would that have been? That would be 3 tickets, right? I don't know. Yeah, 3 tickets. But the amount of revenue you earn is only 3 tickets times $50. You're only getting $150, as opposed to if I can kind of charge a fixed fee, I'm getting $340 there, right? And selling out a ticket to every single game. So I can increase quantity and I can increase the amount of revenue I've earned in this market, right? By kind of charging that fixed fee that's equal to their entire surplus. And they'd be willing to pay up to exactly what their surplus amount was, right? So they'll charge a fixed fee up to that amount of consumer surplus. And they'll keep that fixed price of a ticket each time they attend a game is now essentially 0, okay? So that's 2-part pricing. So the final thing we'll go through is quantity discounts, right? So same kind of idea. We know that the marginal utility derived from tickets for each consumer decreases the more that they buy, right? So you could think about this on a per game basis, right? Maybe, the amount of tickets I buy to go to one game, maybe like to bring, I don't know, my kid's friend to the game, or maybe I want to bring one friend, but to bring two friends, and I got to buy 3 tickets, and I don't value that near as much, or I could think about it on a season level basis where I value going to the first game a lot more than I value going to the second game, right? We can think about quantity across the season as well. Either one, this kind of principle applies, okay? So all we're going to do is allow the price I pay to vary with the number of tickets I purchase. So if I buy 1 ticket, the price for that first ticket will be higher than the price that I'll charge the person for the second ticket. And that price will be higher than the price I charge if they want to buy the 3rd ticket, okay? So we're thinking about every time I buy an additional ticket within this season, the price varies. And when I say varies, it decreases. Oops. So what we're going to do there, the way that we think about quantity discounts, how do we set those? So I'll erase this. Maybe we'll get a little bit better of a focus here, hopefully now. So let's say I'm thinking about, I've got my ticket market and I've got individual demand across that season, okay? Wow, this is really bad. Even got my windows closed here. So let's say it starts at 100, right? And we can think about my demand equation is 100 minus, and we'll just do 10 times the quantity of tickets I purchase. So I know this is a little tough to read here, but it's 100 minus 10Q. Okay. Well, how can I find the marginal benefit? Remember, this is demand or marginal benefit of that first ticket. What should I set the price for that first ticket for this consumer? Well, remember, demand represents marginal benefit. So really, I can think about this marginal benefit is my demand curve. So what's, this is looking really bad. Why in the world? Let me see if I can get this in focus. Can't really get here. Nah, not a whole lot better. Hopefully my words and the verbal will go along with the visual. So I've got, this is my marginal benefit, right? So what's the marginal benefit of that first unit? Well, I would just plug a 1 into my quantity. 100 minus 10 times 1, that gives me the marginal benefit of 90. What's the marginal benefit of the second unit? I plug that 2 in, 100 minus 10 times 2, 80, right? I can find the marginal benefit of each additional ticket purchase that season by simply plugging the quantity I'm interested in into the demand or that marginal benefit equation. So I would charge $90 for the first ticket, and then if someone wanted to buy a second ticket, the second ticket only costs them 80. And if they want to buy a third ticket, the third ticket only costs them 70, right? So on and so forth, okay? And that way, what I've done is, sorry, I should kind of draw this out. Where is producer surplus now? Well, it's the price I charge for that first ticket all the way down to that marginal cost of 0. Then the price I charge for that second ticket all the way down to the marginal cost of 0. And we kind of keep doing that, right? And you're noticing we're losing out, like a little bit of this is still consumer surplus, but for the most part, we're turning all of surplus into producer surplus. Not quite as perfect as perfect price discrimination, but getting pretty close, okay? And I know, like I said, I know some of these drawings are not coming in as clear. What if I go over to this side? So I'm trying to adjust. Oh, that's better. I don't know why that made a difference. But you can hopefully kind of see, like, I'm missing out a little bit here on consumer surplus, but I've turned a lot of this into producer surplus. Okay. All right. So that's quantity discounting. And then here, I'll mention this one. It's kind of like what we talked about in class. I mentioned, sometimes they'll charge different consumers different prices. And so really it's just whenever we have demand that varies across consumers, maybe students versus alumni, I'm going to charge different prices to those consumer groups. So typically we see this with like student tickets or senior discounts or kids, like discounts for kids. And basically you just find the equilibrium price for student tickets and then the equilibrium price for alumni. And then you charge them different prices and hopefully somehow verify that the people buying the student tickets are in fact students, right? Because if I'm an alumni and the price is higher, well, I'm going to try to buy a student ticket because I just want to go to the game and it's a lower price. Well, that's when you try to, set things like they have to have a student ID, they have to have an ID that shows they're a senior, right, over 65, or whatever the group is that we're trying to target. So segmented markets, pretty easy. And just, instead of setting one price for all consumers, we try to set a price differently for consumers based off of a characteristic we think influences their ability and willingness to pay. Okay. So I think we'll kind of leave it there. I wanted to keep the video kind of short, related to the stuff we talked about today. So some pricing strategy stuff, covering those slides we missed. We'll pick up next week on natural monopolies, right? This discussion of monopolies, kind of move into, where is it? The labor market, right? So I'll save that for next week, kind of keep this video kind of short. I was going to go over a reading, but I do want to discuss it more in class. So I'm going to save the reading for next week as well. Pretty quick little video. The online quiz, the questions will come from what I was just talking about here. So make sure you are watching this, but keep it pretty short so it's easy to find the different material. All right, we'll see you guys on Tuesday.